Right, so good evening. I'll introduce myself, and I'll have Michelle and Jay introduce themselves as well. And what we do want to, before we do that, we would like you to kind of reflect on what you just saw. And if you can answer the question of what does it mean to you to be American? What is your American creed? So you can answer one of those questions on the Post-it notes, and those are some of the things that we can put on the board up there. So if you can take a little moment and then we'll do introductions.
If you didn't get Post-it notes, there's some on the table there. I mean, I can grab some. Who all needs some? Your favorite color? Last name? Okay.
Give you a few more minutes to wrap up your thoughts.
Grab a cookie.
Grab a cookie, water, tea. So I guess we can go into introductions. My name is Cassie Williams. I'm an academic specialist for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Access, Opportunity, and Success at Southwest Minnesota State University.
Hello, I'm Michelle Knifesterner. I'm the Associate Director of Access, Opportunity, Success at Southwest State.
Hello, my name is Jefferson Lee, and I'm the Campus Diversity Officer, and I work with these ladies.
He's the boss. And so we want to give you some time to reflect, because what it means to be American and all of that is very diverse, depending on your experiences that you've had, your history, how you got to America in the first place. And so it varies. And so I want this to truly be a discussion. So my first question, and we're just going to put it out there, what were your thoughts about the film?
My thoughts about the film were that it was nice and refreshing to hear all the different perspectives and the different narratives.
Anyone else?
I liked the film, but myself, I don't know, I'm very cynical. I have become very cynical over the past few years. It's, the message was hopeful, but, you know, with everything that's going on, I don't know how we can get to that place, how, you know, how we can bring, I would love to see us to be able to bring, the nation together, you know, like, you know, what the one gal was saying about 9/11, I remember that, I remember right after that, how, you know, we put aside our differences, our political parties, our, you know, race, religion, it didn't matter, we were Americans, you know, that's what mattered. But why does it take a tragedy like that? You know, why can't we come together as a nation, just because it's the right thing to do, you know? And I've become very cynical. You know, I think I should get rid of Facebook. You know, I do, just because, you know, I've got, you know, family members who I love and they post things and put down things, and I'm like, why? You know, why do you put those things, you know, down? Do you really believe that stuff? Or, you know, an example, can I give a couple examples? I'll give a couple examples. One was my niece, she posted a thing, a meme or whatever it was a saying, and basically saying that, that now we have two people who are Muslim, you know, Muslims who have been elected into office, and they can't put their hand on the Bible to be sworn in. And, you know, and I reacted badly, I'll admit that. You know, I basically said that's completely ignorant, you know, and that's probably not the best way to come out. If I want to have a discussion, it's probably the best way for me to come out is not to say that somebody's ignorant, whether I believe that or not. But, you know, and then she came back and said, well, you know, you need to learn about our history. And I'm like, and so I gave her a little history lesson that, you know, our nation wasn't, you know, was not founded on, you know, on the premise that we have to have a religious test to hold office in this country. You know, you can put your hand on, you know, a Bible, a Quran, a law book, you know, a box of Frosted Flakes, whatever you want, you know. I mean, that's the freedom that we have in this country, you know. And you know, and I got angry, and you know, I ended up unfriending her on Facebook. You know, and because, you know, I have friends who are Muslim. I have you know, co-workers, you know, who are Muslim. And it's like, and they're friends with me on Facebook, and I just, you know, I don't know, you know, that's just one example, you know. I mean, there's others that I could go into, you know, but it just suffice to say, I just can't believe that people actually believe these things. Or, you know, it's like you have to have a choice, you know, either you have to love your country, or you know, either you have to, in order to love your country, you either have to want to help veterans who are homeless or refugees. We have to take a side. Why do we have to take sides? Why can't we do both? You know, those are the things, you know, the things that I see, you know, those types of posts and things on Facebook drive me crazy. It's like, all they do is divide us. And so it makes me cynical. Sorry, I kind of took some time.
Thanks for sharing that. Anyone else?
I think it's exactly the kind of conversation that we need to have more of. I think if we get to know each other as people, that we come to understand each other and understand that we have the same goals and aspirations, a better life for our children and our grandchildren.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comment, thought? Okay. So I guess we can open it up to the panel here. Jay, would you like to share?
So we watched the documentary today at noon at the college, and I had watched the previous version of it as well. There's an extended one that's a little longer if you have the opportunity to see it. But, you know, I do like the hopeful feeling that it provides and the underlying themes. But, you know, sometimes I get stuck on the whole idea of America because I don't think it's encompassing of who we actually are. And we as a country are very ethnocentric, and we utilize that term, and we're forgetting that there's other countries that are also American. So really, what is it to be someone from the United States, and all of that incorporated with that. And so that's one of the things that I kind of get stuck on when I watch it, because I'm like, oh, but if we're gonna say we're American, then we have to be aware of the fact that it's north, south, central, all of that. And then if we think about just the United States, then who is all a part of that? And so.
Sure. Give me a break. No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
I just have one thing I was going to say. You know, most of us don't have any experience with anything but being from the United States, so, you know, when you ask that question, it's kind of like, well, I don't know, I've never lived in another country. Anybody else feel that way?
I grew up in South Minneapolis, and, well, here lately, there is where the Somalis live. And they have a different religion, and they probably have a different language. And then I started to think, oh heck, I grew up in that spot. It was Jewish then. And they had a different religion and a different language. And they were the friends of mine. But I don't know any Somalis. So it'd be hard for me to learn about them without knowing them.
Anybody else?
So I guess I was supposed to share what I thought about this film. For me, it's a tough film to watch, honestly. As you said, it puts a lot of hope out there. I used the word propaganda earlier. I look at it and it talks about, and it gives this perception that we're a country that is just so loving and caring, and we include everybody. But yet and still, we're upset because Colin Kaepernick took a knee because men and women of color are being killed and not justly given justice. We still have students that are people in this country where people are using the N-word to slander them. You said something, and I don't want to challenge what you said, but the whole idea that we all came together on 9/11. Well, there were some Muslim brothers and sisters that we started to ostracize because of the people that hit the towers. And so, my problem with this film is that there's so much in there. If you take a time and go back and watch it again and watch it again, every time I watch it, I see something else. I don't know if you realize, but he began this film by talking about the American myth. And I don't know how many of you caught that, but that's the term he used, that it's a myth. So it's a myth, well, is it a dream or is it a myth? And often I hear people say American nightmare. Now, don't get me wrong. I have, as a black man in this country, and I've been to every state except for Hawaii. I've been out of the country. There's a lot to be thankful for here, a lot, so please don't misunderstand me. I've served in the military, I have a son in the Air Force. I believe in taking care of our citizens, but I also believe that as a nation, we have a long ways to come if we're going to say that we're equal and equality and we're for civil rights. That's just not happening. So I can go on and on and on. I would encourage you to watch this again and again and look at the different things in there because there's a lot of things that the guy talked about baseball and how everybody comes together. Well, that only lasts as long as you're on the team and the game is playing. I mean, when the game is over, the black guys go to their corner, the white guys go to their corner, and so it's all a myth. Not that we can't love each other. I grew up in a Christian family church. My father was a minister, my grandfather. and go on, grandmother, there's a bunch of them. But it didn't matter what ethnicity you were. If you're hungry, you come and eat at our house. If you need a place to lay your head, you can come lay your head at our house. It doesn't matter if you're a black woman, a white man, or a child. We need to love each other, and I think that's the main key. But that film just interests me. I mean, it's a strange film to me.
I probably didn't say that very well, but
Yeah, I've got a question. Do you believe in such a thing as a helpful myth?
a helpful myth.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by that.
You know it's a myth, but it's helpful to believe in it, rather than the bitter reality.
I live the bitter reality.
Yeah.
So I can arguably say yes and no. I understand where you're going, but how is that helpful myth helping these young men and women? I fear my son driving a car in this country because I don't know if he's going to be beaten if he's pulled over. I don't know that. And so I fear that. There's a lot of things I fear because it's predicated on this myth that somebody said that in this film they talked about, the young lady said something about she's in the military, she thinks she can go everywhere and have a place to stay. I can't go everywhere and lay my head. I just can't. And I was in the military. I don't have that same belief. But I don't know if I helped that or not.
Test it. You can let Jeff. Go ahead, Tess.
So I would say with regard to the helpful myth, I think we can tell a true story of America that's hopeful and real, that doesn't require myth. So I think we can look at our history squarely in the eye, and we can tell a story of how we became a more progressive nation, how we became a better nation, how we started by taking land from indigenous peoples and labor from black folk and came out further along than we were back then. That isn't a myth. That's a true story. And I would say with regard to the film, I'd say this American Creed can be helpful, but I think we can have one that's not mythological. We can have one that's based on our history if we're willing to face it, that's also hopeful. But I would also say that the one of the premises of the movie is that we should have conversations. And Secretary of State Rice said that young people who grow up in the projects are less likely to get out of the projects now than they used to be. And that the levels of inequality in the nation are greater than they used to be. And no conversation is going to change that. So there's this idea that if we have a meeting like this and we talk and we get to know each other, even if we kept doing it, the people that cause those disparities to be wider will not be influenced by conversation. They'll be influenced by challenges for power and actually succeeding in our challenges for power. I'm not against conversations, I like conversations, but that's not what created inequality, and that's not what will resolve it.
I was just gonna say that's a good point. I mean, if we want change, we have to mobilize for change. You know, and we have to elect people who represent those values. You know, that's really what we have to do.
I know for me, watching the film, one of the things that that resonated with me was, you know, the young kids. One particular young black girl who said, you know, how she views what American is was freedom, right? And so I thought about me as a child and how, you know, you do the Pledge of Allegiance, you know, you're taught to be proud of America. And over time, you really truly get a sense of where you fit in this space called America as a young black girl. And so it's challenging when you you learn the truth, right? That your folks didn't just come over here and want to, you know, a new land. They were forced over here, and forced over here, and also your past, your ancestors have been erased. Right now, we're trying to find our lineage, and it's a struggle. And so I think about the transitions that me as a person of color have on this journey, trying to fit in this space where I'm not always accepted by everyone. And then continually, now I have kids, and I have to go through the same process, where right now, they're proud to be an American, and when does that change for them? And so I struggle looking at how nice it could be, but it's not like that all the time. And I think about those kids in the classroom, because it should be like that. It should be. It should be a wonderful place. But for those children of color, when is it going to change for them, where they realize they don't fit in every space, that they can't just go everywhere? And so, yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I was just going to add to that, both off of what Jay and Cassie said, but there's a scene in there with the students. The young boy says that anything is attainable within the United States. And the teacher, with her arms folded, looks at him and said, if you're willing to work hard enough for it. And so, to me, that's such a hard line, and it's a group of students of color, and already are going to have to prove themselves in more than one capacity throughout their lifetime, to add to what both Jay and Cassie were talking about. So that has struck me each time I've watched it. I'm just like, whoa, why?
I think too, when you watch this, when I start to hit to watch it again, every time they talk about disparity, they show a person of color in this film. I mean, you didn't notice that, did you? So every time they talk about disparity or lack of achievement, they show a person of color. And so that's why I have a problem with stuff like this. The hope is good. We have to have hope. To answer you, yes, we do have to have hope, or things won't change. But this film just shows a lot of things. One thing I've always talked about, and I go to the military piece, how many of you have noticed when you watch ads and things on TV when they're soliciting us for money for veterans, how often do you see a person of color in those pictures? Have you ever thought about that? You very rarely ever see a person of color in those pictures, but yet still men and women of color are going to war alongside our white brothers every day. So you talk about equality in this film and all this stuff, but yet still it's not being shown to us. Anybody else? Go ahead.
I thought it was really significant that they showed the person becoming a citizen and then also renewing his citizenship, in their own way. I think being an American citizen is to agree to live under a constitution or under a law, the rule of law. We don't do very well at it, but right now everything that's going on politically is a struggle in that respect, it seems like. And we kind of agree to disagree intellectually, but also racially or whatever, in this country without killing each other. Some countries do kill each other. We have one language, pretty much, and we kind of agree that there is a law that we don't cross, or that we. So anyhow, that was kind of what I took away from one of the things I took away from the film.
Anybody else?
Questions?
So once again, reflecting back, what were, and I always like to go back because I think about young people and how we start that process on how we define, our existence, right? How do we fit in certain spaces? And so one of the questions I have for you all, and I would love for you to share it, just based on what you were taught, or neighborhoods that you were brought up in, or experiences that you had, how did that either sway your perception of what it means to be American, or have things stayed the same, your thought process over time? I would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Well, when I was young, I was put into foster care, and I ended up going into a foster home that was actually located on Prairie Island Indian Reservation. And so from the time that I was just out of grade school until I graduated high school, I was best friends. My best friend in high school he was a Native American, and so were his brothers and his sister, and all the people around me basically were Native American. But it gave me a different perspective on America, because I saw the reality of what white people had done, how we had taken these people's land, and basically said, well, everything, on this side of the Mississippi is yours, and then, well, everything, except for this is yours, and everything except this is yours, and then finally, you see that island out in the middle of the Mississippi that, floods out during, wet years, well, that's what's yours, and, you see those little pockets all over America, and that's what we did. And it made me realize, that just the amount of, destruction that was caused, and the fact that so many white people are oblivious to these things. And another thing that, that I think about is, they talk about white privilege. And as a white male, I understand it, I do. But I walk around with white privilege every day, but I don't necessarily realize it, But the thing is that what I have to recognize is I don't have to necessarily, I didn't do anything to deserve it, I didn't ask for it, but it's there. It is what it is. I mean, it's a reality. But what I need to do is I need to realize, not my white privilege, but I have to realize that other people don't have that. And that, I have to try to understand their reality. And, what can we do as a country to change that, because we're not equal. We're not an equal nation. We're just not, I do believe that opportunity is there for anybody who wants it. But, one of my favorite commercials, or it's actually, I think it was a video I saw on YouTube, was where they lined up a group of children, and they were of different religions and races and whatever. And, when they asked these simple questions, anybody who grew up in a two-parent home, take a step forward. Anybody who, went to a private school, take a step forward. And as they asked each of these questions, you could see the disparity and the difference, that yes, you can win the race, and it was a foot race is what it was. And yes, the kid who didn't get to take all the steps forward can win the race, but he has to work that much harder. We do have opportunity in a constitution in this country that we hope is abided by to the best of our ability. But there's still disadvantages out there, and what can we do to help that?
Thank you. Any other comments?
So question, I heard something to the effect of, our memories of our youth and how that kind of shapes us. And it made me think, somebody said something of an experience I had my first year in college, a connection I made with a bunch of young, I was on a football team, a bunch of young black guys on the football team, and I didn't know any black people growing up, not one. And go to this college almost 400 miles away, don't know really anyone there, and the weird thing that kind of connected me with a lot of them was just our first day experience, that every single other person from communities like mine were being brought to school by their parents. And I didn't think anything of it, the fact that I was on my own. And had all my possessions crammed into this, really old, crappy, beat-up car. And I show up and all these moms, dads, some of them even grandparents are carrying it and stuff and helping get in their dorms and everything. And I'm just not thinking anything of it, like I said, just carrying all my stuff and trying to figure things out. But then I started making these connections with all these young black guys that were in the same boat as me, because all of them were from out of state, and I was an in-state guy. And none of them had parents there. So even though we didn't have, on the surface anything in common, that was the one weird thing that we had in common, that we were on our own. And so when they're off, the other guys are off doing stuff with their parents, I didn't have any parent to go do stuff with, so I naturally just needed another person to connect with, so I would go hang out with them, or go see their room, or go get lunch with them, or whatever it might be. And it just made me think of that experience, thinking back that I never was really conscious of it at the time. But looking back, I think that's kind of a neat, opportunity I had to meet people, that I didn't know before. And I'm still friends to this day with some of them, so that was a neat experience that I think of that, kind of influenced me with maybe just being aware of things like that, because I don't think I really was before that. And just some other things that were said that I kind of want, if anybody's got some perspective on. The concept of, being cynical and how to balance that with also trying to be positive. I'm a public school teacher, and I'll get some tough questions from kids, and one in particular I've got for the last few years, and I promise I'm not trying to be political or anything here, but I will sometimes have kids come up to me and they'll say things like, "Mr. Moore, are you ready for America to be great again?" And that's exactly what I will say to them. Well, you gotta be careful with how you say it. I will turn it around and I'll say, well, I'll be happy to have this conversation with you, but first I would like you to write a nice little explanation as to when do you think it was great, or try to be positive, what are some great things about America? Because, if I'm just really blunt with them, and some kids pick and choose, I will kind of say the blunt answer of saying, well, I don't know if I'm ready to make it great again, but I sure would like to see it be great. That, and if it's a kid I really know well, they'll ask a question, I'll say, well, it's hard for me to judge anything great that participated in genocide. If you just want to be really blunt about it, but of course that's a tough conversation to have with a middle school kid. But but that's where I struggle with, where do you balance that pessimism, or maybe being more realistic or honest with some kind of positive. So that's kind of the question I'd like to pose, is where do you strike that balance between being positive and being more honest or more real?
Not to plug my own theory, but so I think we can say that, when America started as a nation, there were very few people who were qualified as citizens. So if you look at the Constitution, it was property, white men over 21. Not exactly, but almost exactly. And we have a much broader definition of citizenship now. And it happened because people who were defined out of citizenship made demands to become citizens and formed institutions of their own that gave them the power to make consequential demands. So we can tell a story of America that's hopeful, but we have to change the people that are our heroes and sheroes. So it won't be that we wait around and somebody who doesn't look like everybody in America made America great. All of us together did it, right? So and that I think is a true story. That's not a myth. That's actually how America became more democratic and more free. It was African American people liberating themselves. It was Native Americans resisting. It was Asian Americans demanding respect. It was women agitating for the vote. It was working class white men who were denied the vote because they didn't have property, who demanded that the property qualification be lifted. All those things were done by the people who were left out who wanted to be citizens. And that's not a mythological story, that's an accurate story about how it happened. So I think we can tell a hopeful story of America, but to tell it that way, you can't ignore slavery, you can't ignore genocide, you can't ignore internment. You have to tell those stories, but then you say, how did we overcome them? How did we get as far as we've gotten? And I think that's where we have to, I think you can tell it that way. I think that's a hopeful story, but some people will find it challenging and unpalatable. But I think it's accurate with the evidence.
But all those changes began with people having conversations in bars, in churches, in homes. It builds momentum, it informs and educates. And so conversation is where it begins. Now it goes way beyond that, but if we don't have that initial conversation, that movement, that strength, that push often doesn't happen. So we need to be having these kinds of conversations and acknowledging where we came from, all the warts, everything. We can't change what's in the past, but we can build to change the future. I grew up in the 60s, and they say if you remember the 60s, you didn't live in them, but I did, you know. And I was hopeful. When I graduated from college, I was hopeful that we were going to be soon treating all races and both sexes as human beings instead of always discriminating. Well, it hasn't happened. You know, we aren't living in a utopia by any means. In some ways, we've gone backwards. And I think the key word is being progressive. We have to be progressive or we don't go forward. There's progressive. I mean, that's to move forward. And if we don't move forward, I've learned a long time ago, you don't just stand still because there's always forces pushing you backwards. So if you aren't going forward, we said in JCs, if you aren't growing, you're dying. And people would say, yeah, but we can just maintain. And to maintain a chapter, you had to have 25 members. So they would maintain 25 members. And pretty soon that chapter was gone. You have to be growing. You have to be building your base. You have to be having conversations, influencing people, and sometimes begging, prodding, kicking, screaming. You know, we have to get the word forward and a word of hope. What?
I just want to mention a comment from one of the students this afternoon, who is from Nigeria, right? Was that?
Mm-hmm.
She said, "You may think things are really bad here, but for us, there is an American dream. We still want to come. It still is something we aspire to." So that was a little ray of hope. And to hear that, even though things are challenging.
You know, one thing about immigration, people always say people should come here legally. Well, we had this great wave of people coming from Europe.
And they got on a boat and just came here. They didn't have permission. They just came. You know, and for a while we ran them through Ellis Island or through a center in Baltimore, or, you know, my ancestors came through Baltimore. They didn't come here legally, they just came. And now we have quotas and restrictions and make it hard for people to come here legally. And yet we scream and say, you gotta be here legal. I mean, you saw in the movie, you had to be legal. I mean, illegals aren't welcome. Only legals are served, you know. And yet we make it so hard for people to be legal. And one of the things I found is that so many people who think they're such great patriots, such great Americans, can't answer the questions that a person needs to answer to become a citizen of this United States?
I think I just recently saw a statistic that 9 out of 10 people could not actually pass the naturalization test. So, 9 out of 10 Americans. So, yes. You know, I don't want you to misunderstand me. Again, I like to say there are a lot of things that I've been able to achieve because of things that we have overcome in this country. I can go to a college next to my white brother. I can go to different places in this country, but that doesn't mean that I don't have some reservations about things and I'm not prejudged or I have to be careful. There are simply some places that talk about that white privilege. There are simply some places you can go that I can't go. There's some doors that open for you that don't open for me. There's opportunities that don't come to me that would come to you purely by someone looking at you and seeing your complexion. But I'm blessed. I mean, we can't say there aren't some great things going on in this country. I don't want people to think that I'm not saying that. But the young lady talked about, the immigrant talked about coming to America. The scary thing is when we hear that we perceive it as, oh, it's not that bad. But why are we still talking about equal pay for women? You know, there's a lot of things that we need to change and work on in this country. And it's not all black and white. So we've had kind of a black and white conversation here. But when we talk about everything, there's some movement that we can make as a people. So,
I was just going to add, you know, thinking about talking to young people, I try to be very open with my daughter about all conversations. I'm biracial myself. I'm Sichangu Lakota on my mother's side, and my father is white. Family is German and Czech, and they were westward expansionists. They homesteaded like 15 miles from my Lakota relatives. My parents did not know each other until later on in life. It's just a weird story about all that. But my mother is the one who taught me culture, taught me what the world is, and it exists through her lens. So I really strongly identify as a Lakota in all ways. And so with my children, I've always tried to be very open with them about what has taken place. I've tried to tell them the stories. But I also believe that there are places where we provide that there is hope, and there are different things. Like my father's life, if you ever have the chance to hear me tell it, or him, but he was raised by Catholic nuns because his family could not take care of him. And it's for reasons because my grandmother was a divorced woman who was considered to be unwed and kicked out of her hometown by the Christian families in that town. So it's, you know, just trying to tell them, like, people will always, there are people there, like Jay has said, that will help and provide that. So one of the things that I enjoy about my daughter is that she's ferocious in her mindset and in her beliefs, and she's not afraid to challenge her peers. Like, she comes home and she tells me that she's questioned her friend for using the N-word because she heard it in the song and she's told her she can't use it. But then, you know, she'll have a group of young friends tell her, no, it's not a big deal. And she's like, no, it is a big deal. You can't use it. And this is someone who's at 11 at the time, trying to stand up and stick up for what she believes is right and is right. It's not a word to be used. And so hopefully, you know, that continues and she's able to provide some sort of sparks for her own peers and in seeing those things as they grow and develop, because I know they're not necessarily having those conversations at home. So that's just my piece about that. And I appreciate you as a social studies teacher as well. Thinking about the question that Cassie posed about how we feel about being American or a United States citizen, I have strong feelings. A lot of that all comes from my Lakota side. My German and Czech relatives, they served in wars, but they never talked about it. My Lakota relatives lived it, and it's still something that's very much alive. If you go to a powwow or a chipi, you will see that we have honor guard. You'll see people, their regalia is ornate in the places that they've served and what they've done. It's a strong sense of pride. My mother has a Lakota name, which is an honor name, and it's based on my grandpa, Steve Spottitel, serving in World War I in the Rainbow Division, which was the first unified division of people of multiracial backgrounds. And so my mother's name is Rainbow Woman in honor of the fact that my grandfather served in this particular capacity. So it's something that's always talked about on my Lakota side. And my brother, he still is an athlete, but he's a really good athlete when he was younger, and he served overseas. And it was one of the things that he was super proud of, is that he could represent the United States and that he could stand before the flag and do it in that capacity. And that continued on with me. I chose to serve as a VISTA, which is AmeriCorps Vista, Volunteers in Service to America, for 2.5 years in the Domestic Peace Corps. And part of that was, as a Lakota, your value system is that you need to give to your community. And since I didn't grow up on a reservation, I grew up right here in Marshall, Minnesota, I chose to serve in an urban population for American Indian people. And that was how I could give back for what I have been given, the privilege that I do have growing up where I did, having 2 educated parents who allowed me a wonderful pathway. So when I think about being from the United States, I know I have that. I know my Lakota cousins did not have the same, as well as my Sterner cousins. My brother and I are some of the only ones who graduated from high school and college. And so that is a privilege all on its own. So that's how I see that about who the United States is, and part of that dream, because I know that's what my parents wanted and my grandparents wanted for us as well.
Thank you, Michelle. So I know that we are getting closer in the time, am I right? If there are any final thoughts? Any final thoughts? Okay.
I guess the one thing I wanted to end with is that I see around me, you know, some in my relatives, some people I work with, people I know, and I see the prejudice, and I see the ignorance. And for me, I think part of it is you know, realizing that somebody mentioned this earlier, that you're not going to change everybody. You know, some people will never change. They're always going to hold on to certain things for whatever reason, and you know, they cannot be they won't be reasoned out of thinking that way. They won't be, you know, loved out of thinking that way. That's just, they're going to be set in their ways. And for me not to allow that, to allow my cynicism to come to the point where I no longer, and I think it talked about this in the movie, that I no longer took place in the solution. You know, that I continue to be active and continue to try to, you know, move for that progress. So.
I just wanted to mention the idea of a myth being a lie has taken over our culture. I wanted to bring up the idea that the Bible, all the religions of the world are based on myth. One of the things I ran across in my readings was that thought is, no, other way around. I always get this one mixed up. It's simple, but it's tricky. Speech is thought incarnate. Myth is soul incarnate. And when you keep that in mind, you have to realize that you're not dealing, when you're dealing with mythology, you're not dealing with the truth per se. It's something that shines through when you tell the story. And it's much more important than anything that we do. And you should consider that when you're using the word, because that is the true meaning of the word myth. Is not a lie. That's just been developed since the politicians took it over, I guess. But soldiers going off to war, that's, you know, they believe in that myth, the myth of America, to defend it. And it's much more important than just some lie that some guy told, you know.
Just kind of have one short experience that happened this year that I think is kind of good evidence to the importance of this conversation. Sorry, it's negative, and once again, it might sound political, and I do not intend for it to be that way. But just in covering some current events a few months back and doing some things, sometimes I'll put up just kind of a little item for students, food for thought, maybe make them think about things. And so I took 2 images directly off of U.S. Congress website, and it was the incoming freshman class in Congress. And I just wrote one question on it. It came with labels Republican and Democrat, and I covered them up, and it's on the screen, and just asked students a simple question: do you notice a difference? And unanimously, well, night and day. This side is almost completely male and appears to be all white. One woman, and this group seems to be pretty diverse. I go, I find that interesting, you know, just something to think about. Didn't have any other follow-up, but the other question was simply do you have any guesses as to why or what the difference is or whatever? And this part was heartbreaking on many levels. I can only think of 1, maybe 2 at the most, kids that had a different answer than the one I'll give, including one of my own children, and also including my wife and I host 2 AFS students that are both young women, one from Nigeria, one from Thailand. They're both Muslim students or Muslim people. Both of them answered this way, that this group and this group, well, this group up here, the almost completely white group or virtually all white, that's the American group. And this group must be people from a bunch of different places. They're, you know, and not American. And I kind of wasn't expecting that. I just thought generally something interesting to think about, but to get that answer time and time again from a wide variety of people, like I said, even from my own family, that's the American group and this is something other, just crushed me. And so when I heard about this program, I was, you know, very happy to hear about that because I thought it's a conversation that needs to be had. Obviously not just because of that, but especially in light of that experience. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I enjoyed the whole evening and I really appreciate everything that everybody's done, all the different voices that have been heard. And I just wanted to add to that, my father's 92 and he served in the Federal Bureau of Investigation for 26 years. I have a bracelet that has the little gold medallion that says that he served 25 years that I wear proudly. FBI is not perfect. No American institution is, right? But when the book, well, a year ago when the FBI was trashed by the current person in the White House, I was heartbroken. I called my father and just had a conversation. I mean, that's, you know, that was his career. He served in New York. He served all over and never spoke one word about it because you can't, because it's all confidential. So this week, all 6 of us kids got a book in the mail, The Threat by Andrew McCabe, Protecting American Democracy in the Age of Terror and Trump. And so he wanted us to read this because he said, I never talked about it. You kids were what was important to me, your activities. And I'm just starting to read the book, but it's talking about what the FBI does to defend democracy and to, you know, to this America that we aspire to try to make it a safe place for everybody. So anyway, just, I have a child overseas. My only child is overseas. She has no interest in coming back to America. My son-in-law is from Ireland and Canada. He has no interest. I'm going to be a grandmother in June. And so I'm literally stretched around the globe, my heart. And I love America. I grew up with every Murphy family celebration ended up with, this sounds super corny, you guys, but singing, you know, we're all musicians, someone would play the Battle Hymn of the Republic, and we would sing it, we would march around. And, you know, so, I mean, patriotism was in our family, but it's, you know, my heart breaks. A lot of my poetry is about what does it mean, I'm a poet, what does it mean to be a citizen? And I'm also a grandma of one of our SMSU students who had a baby. She's from Nigeria. I was the white woman in the room helping her. She delivered the baby, so I'm like, the nurse is like looking at me like, I'm the white grandma, just get over it. But she, you guys know Toby, it breaks my heart that she's like, I'm gonna dress my little boy in she has 2 boys, in bow ties. They're gonna look like, you know, nothing's gonna happen to them. And it's like, that ain't right. That ain't right, you know, that she has to worry about that. She's a young mother. And then something else comes on the American news. So anyway, I write poetry, I teach, I just think all of us, it's very hard to have hope, but I think it's our only course. And I do think conversations are important. But like you said, Jay, seeing beyond the propaganda, it's a good film, but there's a lot of holes in it. A lot of holes. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I think we want to say thank you for coming out. You know, if you ever have more questions, just feel free to ask. And, thanks for coming. There are going to be other nights, so hold on.
Yeah, March 26th.
March 26th will be focusing on agriculture.
Yeah, agriculture will have a noontime session at the college. Do you remember, is it upper one?
CH201.
It's in CH201, Charter Hall 201, and then we'll be here again at 6:30 that evening. Please join us.
Agriculture's not my thing, so you don't have to.
Unfortunately for everybody, agriculture is not.